Drop in the chat box here our location where all of these recordings are. And also we had a great comment last time on if anyone attended a single one of these recordings, or if they attended all of the recordings, could they get a certificate? And so we're like, oh my gosh, absolutely. So Darcy and I have been working with Ada here to draft and create some really neat certificates. So when you go to that link, not only are you going to find all of the recordings and the emails that Darcy has sent out, with those emails recording all of the important resources that she talks about within each recording, but you'll also find an attendance form. And so Darcy is working on recording that, and you can put your name in those attendance form in an effort to receive a neat little certificate upon completion of this awesome series. Darcy, did you want to add anything on that? Did I say that all right?
Yeah, I think that was all correct. So I think we're good with all of those logistical things.
Awesome. Well, I will let you take it away, Darcy, and introduce yourself for potentially new people on here, because you always do such an amazing job at that.
All right. Well, good morning. As Leanne mentioned, my name is Darcy Cole, and I work just to the east of you all in Minnesota. I work for University of Minnesota Extension, our 4-H Youth Development Program here. And in my role that I have with 4-H formally, I support the southern half of Minnesota with program operations. So that's like all things people love about their jobs: finances, risk management, insurance, that kind of stuff is really like kind of my work that I really focus on. But I also serve here in Minnesota as kind of the lead disability staff person here as well, to kind of keep continuing to push this work forward. Part of the reason that this work is so important to me is I have been with Minnesota 4-H for almost 18 years now. We're just a couple months shy of that. And over that course of time, I've seen youth come through our program that maybe have not been quite as successful as we might like them to see, and discovering that sometimes it has to do with a disability, right? So for me, that's a passion work professionally. Personally, I have 4 kids. My oldest 2 both have autism. So I also wear that parent hat as well when we talk about disability work. So you're probably going to hear throughout this series of sessions a little bit of those professional and personal things kind of intermixing as we talk about why this work matters and kind of some of our best practices. Today specifically, we're going to talk about positive behavior intervention strategies, which are really just strategies that we can put in place to support young people, could be with or without a disability, to really help to reduce the number of challenging behaviors that we might see in a program, and help young people to find a different way to communicate their needs rather than acting out with what we might consider challenging behaviors. So, and this work really applies to anything we're doing, whether it's an after-school program, a project workshop, a camp in the summer. Chances are that if you have been on staff for very long, you probably have at one time, if not more than that, experienced some challenging behaviors that you may or may not have really known how to support and how to hopefully prevent in the future. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit specifically about today. And as I mentioned, a lot of these are really things that we need to think really hard and intentionally about when we have young people with disabilities in our program, but they're also going to apply to all of the people that we have participating. So today we're specifically going to look at a brief introduction of the purpose of behaviors. We'll talk and dive more into this in the next session when you're all in person, when we talk about some specific scenarios that you might face and how we could handle those best. But we'll talk at least real briefly about it today. And then we're also going to, again, explore a number of behavior management techniques, which are formally called behavior or positive behavior intervention strategies, or PBIS. You may hear them sometimes called. And then I'll also share with you some resources that you can really use to support this work that you're going to do around supporting young people with behavior. So as I mentioned, I'm going to give you just a really brief overview about behavior today, and then we'll talk more about it in your next session, because that's really going to be the focus of that one. But some of the things I want us to kind of keep in the forefront of our mind as we are talking about how we want to best support young people when they might experience challenging behavior is that whenever we see behavior, it's always a form of communication. So remember that all behavior is some type of communication. It can be a positive or a negative communication. So, you know, if I'm sitting in a session and I'm in the front row, I'm watching what you're doing, I'm taking notes, I'm really engaged, right? That's a form of positive communication. I'm showing you that I'm interested in the topic you're talking about. I'm engaged with what you're doing. I'm focusing on you and not being distracted by other things that might feel like they're sometimes more pressing. And on the same note, like we may also show that we are bored by yawning, tapping our feet, staring off, like scribbling things, whatever it might be. So we can show through behavior both positive and negative communication as far as what we're feeling and experiencing in the moment. It's also important to remember there's always a reason for what we might call quote unquote problem behavior. And when I talk about it, you're usually going to hear me call that challenging behavior because I don't really like the terminology of problem behavior because it makes it sound like it's a really negative thing. And I'm not saying challenging behaviors aren't negative, but we don't want to really frame it in that way when we can. But again, think about, like I said, there's always a reason. So, and many times it's because someone may be trying to communicate verbally to us if they have those skills, that they need help, they're frustrated, they're not engaged, whatever it might be. And if we don't hear that message loud enough through the verbal communication, sometimes they'll use challenging behavior as a way to really loudly communicate a message to us so that we hopefully then are going to see, right? So, you know, if we're seeing that someone is frustrated with their work and they're trying to communicate that to us and we're ignoring that, then the next things we might see is we might see them acting up in our groups because that is their way of communicating to us that they are really just struggling with what we're doing or not engaged with what we're doing. So just remember that there's always a reason for the behavior. And like I said, a lot of times it comes out because people either aren't able, one, to communicate verbally to us, or two, we're just not hearing that message that they're trying to give us. It's also important to remember that there can also be many reasons behind one specific behavior. So just because we're seeing a behavior doesn't mean like it's always communicating the exact same thing. So for example, if we're in an after school program and we're asking a young person to fill out a worksheet, if they crumple that worksheet up and throw it on the floor, it might be because they're not interested in doing it. It might be because they're frustrated because maybe fine motor writing type of things are difficult for them. It might be because they don't feel challenged enough, like it's too easy for them. So there's a lot of reasons why we might see a specific behavior. So just remember that too, that behavior doesn't always mean the same thing every time, even if it is the same person or from person to person. Also remember that people can learn to understand behavior. So as youth development professionals, we can learn as we watch and observe young people to really try to understand the behavior and then interpret what they're trying to communicate through that challenging behavior. So just remember that as well. And if we can start to understand that, interpret it, then it's easier for us to be able to hopefully find other ways for someone to communicate rather than a behavior. And then finally, I want you to remember that challenging behavior can be reduced with supports, not punishment. So if we are giving a consequence for behavior, that can, in the short term, seem like it fixes the problem, right? However, long term, the only way really to fix challenging behavior is to help someone understand what type of supports they can use to better communicate what their needs are, or better work through strong feelings that they might be having. So just remember that too. And if we can really frame behaviors around communication, I think it helps us to be more open about what we're seeing and also more understanding about it versus being really reactive in the moment as we're experiencing things. So just know that. So, but like I said, we'll jump into this topic a lot more in the next session, but I think it's important for us to talk about a little bit before we talk about strategies, because many of them, as I mentioned, that we see are really to help support ways of people communicating something through a different strategy that's more positive. All right, so I'm going to share with you, I think there's like 12 total behavior management strategies, or like I said earlier, these are called PBIS, kind of when we talk about, you know, special education or we talk about disability type of work. And we'll walk through each of these. I do have a couple of videos I'll show you, so hopefully our sound will work on that. If not, I'll have you kind of watch them independently and we'll come back and talk about it as groups. So we'll kind of play that by ear when we get to that point. But we're going to talk through each one of these so that you have some ideas of how you can actually implement this in the 4-H work that you might be using and doing. So the first one I want to talk about is having clear routines and expectations. Sounds pretty self-explanatory, but it's really important for us that we make sure that we're posting our routines, posting our expectations that we have for the program, because if we aren't clearly communicating them, it can cause a lot of anxiety. So I talked about in the last session about having like visual schedules to be able to show young people what's going to happen and the order those are going to happen in. And by having those, we automatically reduce anxiety, which then reduces some of the extra stresses on young people that can cause behaviors because of not being able to really cope with that anxiety or that stress. And again, expectations, if we don't post what those social rules are or expectations of the group, it's really hard for young people to live up to what our expectations are. It's also a good way for us to be able to refer young people to what the expectations are when we maybe see a behavior. So make sure you're having those clear routines, posting them, and then posting those expectations. It's also important we talk about clear routines if we can to do things kind of in a similar routine or similar set of steps when we're meeting with young people in kind of a consecutive group. So if you're coming in for an after school program, it might be the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take attendance. Then you're going to do some type of movement activity so people can get a little energy out and kind of get ready for the day. That might be a snack. Then maybe project learning. So kind of keep, if you can, that same type of routine so then people can get into that routine and understand what they're going to do throughout the course of their time with you. Number 2 is to use pre-arranged signals. And what those are is it's a way of letting people know that they need to either like think about their behavior or know that the behavior that they're exhibiting is unacceptable without necessarily like calling out to the whole group, right? And making a big deal about it. So, for example, it might be a hand motion, it might be a shake of a head. Sometimes people will use like colored pieces of paper to kind of monitor on their desk, where they're feeling, where they're at behavior-wise. So that can be one as well. But again, it's really about not drawing all of the attention to a young person who's having a challenging behavior, but rather being able to communicate to them that they need to maybe get on task again, that they need to maybe follow some of the rules and expectations you have in a way that is a little more discreet, but also clear enough that they know that they need to correct some behavior. Number 3 is proximity control, which kind of sounds like it'd be complicated, but really it's about having that teacher or that instructor or maybe that camp counselor, whoever's kind of helping in that environment, to simply like move closer to someone when you're seeing maybe undesirable behavior. And really by doing that, again, it's kind of like that prearranged signal of when I get closer to you, you know that you need to maybe get on task a little bit more. Also, like naturally, like when a teacher or instructor, that person who's kind of seen as kind of being in control of that situation, when they're closer to you, you're going to be more engaged. You're going to be paying attention more because you know they can see what you're doing. So that's really what proximity control is all about, is just getting their attention by being in a closer space with them. And that allows them to know they need to kind of stay on task as well. Plan response method for non-serious behaviors. So this one is really about thinking about how can you stop non-serious behaviors. And this is only successful for this. And the reason is plan response method sometimes can be ignoring a behavior, which sounds kind of a little bit strange maybe, but we know that sometimes young people will exhibit behavior because they want attention. And by displaying a undesirable behavior, they're getting your attention as the teacher, the educator in that room, because you have to go over and you have to address that or correct that, right? So by simply like doing something, it gets them what they want, right? They get that attention. So if it's a non-serious behavior, so say that, they're maybe not raising their hand before they talk, if that's the expectation in the room. And then, you're not going to acknowledge that person when they're speaking until they then raise their hand the way they're supposed to, like their other peers. And that really, again, like it doesn't give them or feed the need for attention, but because you're not recognizing the behavior. However, if it is a serious behavior that they're doing, you obviously can't use this method because if they're doing a serious behavior, you can't simply ignore it, right? It's not going to go away. There might be some safety concerns involved. So this obviously, this planned response wouldn't work in that type of situation or scenario. Or if it's something that's super disruptive. So if it's going to be really distracting to the rest of the group or taking away from their learning, you obviously can't ignore a behavior that's trying to get attention. So that's really what this one is all about. And as adults, we might find it difficult to ignore some of those non-serious behaviors, and it might take us some practice to do that as well, of doing that. But again, if we continually give attention to non-serious behaviors that are looking for attention, it's just going to increase the behavior that they continue to exhibit because they saw that it worked one time. So they're going to think that it's going to work every time. So just know that that's kind of what planned response is all about. And it can also be outside of even just, like I said, the need for attention. And really, planned response is about thinking about ahead of time what you're going to do if a non-serious behavior happens, and then actually doing that, right? Like doing that in the moment. Number 5 kind of comes in with when we talked about some of those like prearranged signals and proximity control. It's really about disciplining privately, right? And I think this applies to anyone, youth or non. None of us want to have someone call us out in front of our peers or in front of the group that we're with, because then usually that's going to just elevate or escalate a behavior that someone is exhibiting because they might have been exhibiting behavior because they were frustrated or not engaged with what you're doing. But now you're calling them out to all their peers. So now not only are they bored or frustrated, now they're mad, right? Because they might be embarrassed, because no one wants to be called out. So if there are discipline issues or needs, do that privately when it's just that young person, whether that is, at the end of a program or maybe as they're coming into the room for the next program, or maybe you can pull them aside and quick just, mention to them what you're seeing, and ask them to really try to control or change that behavior. So just remember that, like, we never want to discipline a young person in front of the whole group. I think it can be really easy to just call it and be like, Darcy, knock it off, right? But again, like, all that's going to do is probably embarrass that young person, or might, again, give them that attention that they need. So make sure you're doing that discipline in a private space outside of the main group. The next one is called the Stop, Think, Act strategy, and I'll give you just a little bit of information, but we're also going to watch a quick video about this one, because I think it's neat to kind of see a little bit more from just me about what this looks like. But really, this is about stopping in the moment, evaluating what the problem is, thinking about solutions to the problem, and then trying to figure out what's the best one of the solutions, and then acting, right? Like acting out whatever that solution is, and then evaluating whether or not that worked. Sometimes when we come up with some strategies, we're going to pick the best strategy for how we can correct behavior. Other times we're going to pick the wrong one, right? And we might need to evaluate, go through that strategy again. So, so we're going to watch, like I said, a really quick video about that. So I'm going to start it. And if you can tell me whether or not you hear sound, which hopefully you will, we'll kind of play it by ear. So.
I am not hearing anything.
All right, no sound. Okay, I was hoping, but if we're not, that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I will give you the link, and it is pretty short. You can see it's about 3 minutes. So I'll give you kind of 3 minutes to like just independently watch the video, and then we'll come back and just talk a little bit about what you saw in the video, about how this might be a useful method, hopefully, in your work that you might do to help young people think about how they can better handle challenging behaviors or things they want to communicate through those behaviors. All right, so I just threw the link in the chat. Like I said, if you want to take about 3 minutes to watch that video, and then we will go ahead and, like I said, just talk through it a little bit. So, but I'll be quiet for a few minutes and then we'll get all back together.
Darcy, do you think me sharing my screen might let it play?
We could try. Do you want to try it?
Yeah, let's just do that just for recording purposes.
Mhm.
Let me try mine. If you want to stop sharing and I
Yes,
will,
I will stop and we'll see if that hopefully works for you.
just because I'm thinking for the recording.
Mhm. Yep. So it'll be slide 5, Leanne. There you go.
Okay. I actually just
All right.
popped up it in YouTube from your link. So if
Perfect.
anybody, can
Yeah.
I get
So
a
see
thumbs
if that
up?
works.
Are you seeing it, Darcy? Okay. I'm gonna play it.
Yep. We're
Please
seeing
let
it.
me know what you guys can hear. Can you hear it?
I'm Obadiah. Eventually,
Yes.
we get emotional. We get angry. We get frustrated. And that might lead us to make some bad choices. We might want to yell or break something. Maybe even hurt someone. And we don't want that. So here's a strategy, a plan. Whenever you feel your emotions taking you out of control, first thing is just stop. What I mean when you stop is to calm yourself. Take a breath. You can even count to 3. And that gives you time to think. You can think about what emotion you're feeling and why. And then you can act. To be or not to be. That's not at all what I was talking about. You want more Scorsese? Like, am I a clown to entertain you? Am I to be laughed at? What makes you fun? No. I mean, do the right thing. Oh, Spike Lee. So, like with you, what was your problem? 3 years Oh, you got hit in the head with a rock, and it hurt, and you were angry, and you wanted to hurt the person who threw the rock, but you stopped, and that's good, because maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they weren't trying to hurt you. Maybe they were just being reckless and irresponsible, but it still hurt. You were angry, but you never want to hurt someone. Maybe you want to tell the other person, hey, you hurt me when you threw the rock. Please stop throwing rocks. So to review, if you ever feel your emotions taking you out of control, stop, think, act. Do the right thing. And that's a way to make this a good day.
All right. Thank you, Leanne, for sharing that, since like I said, it wouldn't do sound for me, but yeah, so that is another, like I said, a specific strategy that you can use when you're looking at how you can support young people. And really it's a way for them, again, like they mentioned in the video, to really stop, right? And before you proceed with maybe that more challenging or negative behavior, to think about how can we better proceed in this situation, and then act hopefully accordingly. So, all right, let me share slides again. Let's get to the next one here then. There we go. So look like you are now seeing them again. All right, so again, here's just a visual that kind of shows that. Like I said, and really it just helps us by doing these strategies to really be able to kind of think through the situation rather than act before we really even think what we're doing, and then maybe it not being what we hoped or expected. This is also a great thing to post in a program when you're there too, because it's a great, again, visual reminder for them of another strategy that they can use to really help themselves act in maybe a better or more productive way in a situation. And you can see there's some questions there to help them kind of think through, like, what's the problem? What are options? And then what's our best path forward? And again, as I mentioned, when they act, hopefully they pick the best option, but sometimes we may find that that might not be quite as successful as we hoped or expected in the situation. That's okay. Then we reevaluate, we use the strategy again if we need to, until we get to whatever the right action hopefully is in that situation. Any questions on that stop, think, act strategy, or even comments about how you think you might potentially use that as a youth development professional? All right, we're going to keep moving on then, because I'm not hearing any other comments around that. So I'm going to share with you 6 more strategies that you can use to help support young people in your programming and help reduce some of those challenging behaviors. The next one is to find opportunities for someone to help others. Sometimes when we're seeing challenging behavior, it can be because someone is bored or disengaged with what we're doing. And if we can give them a specific role, that can then help them to be engaged, help them to give them an opportunity to be a positive role model in your setting. So think about, could they help hand out papers, scissors, whatever supplies you might be doing, collecting things for you. And again, like by giving them roles and giving them ways to help others, it can automatically reduce some of those challenging behaviors because they're more engaged with what we're doing. Another strategy is to use positive phrasing. So what positive phrasing is all about is it's helping people understand the behavior that we want to see. It sounds super simple, but it can be a little bit difficult because we might be more used to calling out the negative behavior, right? And be like, all right, sit down, pay attention, right? And this is really about recognizing, what those good things are. And again, using really positive phrasing that isn't going to be sounding like a negative or like a punishment, because no one wants to hear about a punishment they're going to get if they don't do X, Y, and Z, right? So think about how do we phrase things in a way that it feels like a reward for doing things. So for example, if we finish this learning activity, then we can go out and play a game, or we can go out and use the playground equipment, right? Versus saying like, if you don't get this activity done, we don't get to go outside. We don't get to do any games. We don't get to do any of that. So think about like, how can you phrase things in a way that it feels like a reward for getting through our work, for exhibiting those positive behaviors, versus it feeling, again, like a consequence. And that kind of ties back to, we talked about that behavior at the very beginning. We talked about that we can't really correct behavior through punishment. And if we're phrasing things in a way that it feels like punishment, it's not going to long-term help young people to be successful. So again, like phrase things as rewards or as positive things versus negative or consequences. Number 9, there's state the behavior you want to see. So call out the things that you're seeing that look good in the room. So, if, for example, if you have young people who are just shouting out answers and you want them to raise their hand, before you call on somebody, like say, oh, Darcy, thank you for raising your hand. You're doing a great job waiting, right? And that simply, again, recognizes what the good behavior is that you want to see. And this is a way to call out when you're seeing a young person with a positive behavior. And kind of like when we talked about, nobody wants to be called out for negative behavior. On the flip side, most people want to be called out for positive behavior, right? Somebody might be maybe a little bit more shy and maybe might be a little bit embarrassed when you do that. But even those shy kids usually aren't going to be embarrassed if you're calling out for something good, right? Because they're going to say, hey, look, this person noticed that I'm doing this stuff that's good. And again, it's going to make them feel good with their peers because they said, oh, okay, they just recognize that Darcy's raising her hand really well. Like, I'm doing a great job. So by calling out those behaviors we want to see, it automatically encourages other people to replicate those same behaviors because they also want to have somebody recognize the great things that they're doing. Number 10 is behavior shaping. And behavior shaping is really about acknowledging that not every young person can do everything at 100%. Or all of the time at 100%. So it's really about helping to recognize small improvements that might be happening, so that people are encouraged to continue to make small strides, right? Until they get to the point where things are as good as they can be. So, if you have somebody who's maybe you're doing an activity where you have to get up in front of the group and you want them all to share about something, right? And if you have somebody who's really nervous and or maybe doesn't have the strongest verbal skills to do that, think about like, how can you recognize them for the little strides they're making each time they get up and do that, right? Or on the flip side, if you have somebody who like doesn't feel like they're very good at drawing, doesn't like to draw, right? And you're having them draw. How can you recognize the small improvements they're making each time? Or if you're having someone, you know, you're doing an experiment and you're recording observations you're seeing, and it's challenging for someone to either record that or really pay attention to those small details of that. Again, like as you see them improving and being able to write more details every time, right? Make sure that you're recognizing that for them, because it's going to help them to want to strive to continue to improve that skill or that behavior each time. But really it's about, like I said, again, like recognizing not every young person can do everything at the same level, and that they can't maybe do everything at 100% all the time, right? Because they have some things that we don't always know about, right, in their life that might impact what they're able to bring to each session that they're with us. So recognize those little things that they're doing, and that can help to just shape that behavior just a little bit at a time till we get to hopefully where we want that to be. Number 11 sounds pretty easy, and I think most of us are pretty good about doing that. It's about having some sort of reward that you give people when you're seeing those positive behaviors. So it could be little tangible things you give them, a token, a little prize. It could even be an activity that's preferred with the group. So if the group really likes to go outside and have some just free time playing games, you know, maybe that's your reward. If we get through all of these activities and people are really focusing, they're engaging, then we can go out and do this thing, right? And that can be also, even though it's not a physical thing you're giving to them, it's an opportunity that you're giving to them that allows them to feel like they can work towards that and get through what they want to. Kind of like when we talked about with some of those like visual schedules, having the like that first, then, next, and having that like last thing they're going to do be the thing that they're going to work towards. This is that exact concept, right? Either a physical thing you're going to give them or a preferred activity. And by just having that, again, it can help them get through maybe some of the less desirable things they want to do in order to get to the fun thing that they get or want to do. And then the last strategy I'm going to share is called antecedent behavior consequence, or this is called the ABC method. This is a pretty common method that's used in special education classrooms. And again, this one we'll watch a quick video about too, just because it's a nice way for you to hear a little bit about it. But really, it's about trying to determine what leads up to when you're seeing a behavior, and then what's the consequence, what follows that behavior. So that's really kind of what it's about. And again, we'll watch a video and then we can talk through what this looks like and kind of how you can use it and how it might be applicable in your youth development setting. So Leanne, I just put in the chat a link to the video. Perfect. I will stop sharing. I'll let you share screen so that we can hopefully hear sound again.
Here we go. Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay.
Here is a brief overview of the ABC model of ABA. ABC stands for Antecedent, Behavior, and Consequence. The ABC model is a three-part system used to understand why a behavior occurs. ABC charts are used to provide solid data and evidence to support behavior intervention plans and functional behavioral assessments. ABC charts are an essential part of a student's FBA. One of the main goals of applied behavior analysis is to understand the precise circumstances that lead to inappropriate student behavior. Identify the triggers for student behavior. And that's what behavior analysis is all about, understanding why. The broad definition above describes the ABC model as a three-part system. The first part, the A, stands for the antecedent. The antecedent is what precedes or comes before the behavior. Next is the behavior itself. The behavior studied should be a disruptive action. And the third part is the consequence. That is what directly follows the behavior. When conducting an ABC chart, it is very important to pay attention to the environment of the student, as it often leads to an inappropriate behavior. Student behavior can be triggered based solely on the environment, such as during a certain class period or around particular students. Right now, I'm going to give you an example of an antecedent behavior consequence in play. Let's say that a classroom teacher just finished a lesson and wants to call a student to the board to do a particular problem in front of the classroom. The teacher asks our student to do the problem on the board, but the student refuses. The teacher presses the issue and the student follows up by cursing out the teacher. The teacher then sends the student to his social worker or case manager. Now, analyze this situation. First, the teacher asked the student to do a problem on the board. That was the antecedent. Next, the student cursed at the teacher. That was the wrong behavior. And lastly, the student was sent to the child study team. That was the consequence of cursing at the teacher. All this information should be provided in an ABC chart. With the ABC model, you are looking to collect data in an organized and meaningful way. It is important to provide dates, times, and incidents when collecting your data. With applied behavior analysis, the more data collected, the better. Be sure to get a record on all the details as well. Get the details of the student's environment. One environment may affect the student's behavior, whereas another environment may not. In the example given, it is reasonable to suggest that the student cursed out the teacher because he didn't want to be embarrassed. However, further details may lead to a different conclusion, so this must be studied. Right now, I just want to say thank you for your time and do not forget to subscribe to this channel.
All right, thank you, Leanne. All right, so like I said, I think the video gives you a good overview of kind of what that looks like, how you could potentially use that. You know, in our settings as youth development professionals, we might not be formally like keeping the data like you might in a special education classroom setting. However, I think it's important for us to, you know, if we're seeing repeated behaviors, to somehow track that so that, you know, we can try to figure out if we're seeing the same outbursts in a program. Again, like I said, those antecedents, what are those things that are leading up to it that might be a trigger for that behavior. And if we can track that and kind of figure out what the patterns are, hopefully we can help to reduce those behaviors from happening, because either maybe we don't ask that young person to do that same thing, or we don't you know, ask them to do it in the same way, or we provide extra supports in that when we're going to do that. So again, it's just another way of really tracking what is leading up to behaviors, what those behaviors are, and then kind of what happens after the behavior in a way that we can then use that to hopefully reduce the number of challenging behaviors that we're seeing. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. And starting with your posting of routines and expectations, would it be acceptable to post the reward for good behaviors? Yeah, you absolutely could. I think part of that depends on kind of reading your group a little bit and determining, like, is giving that reward behavior or that reward that they're going to get going to be distracting for them? Or is it going to be something that is going to be something they can work towards, right? And you kind of have to read your group a little bit in that type of situation. Most of the time, by giving the reward, you know, people are going to be able to handle that. It's not going to be too much of a distraction for them. So yeah, I think giving that idea is an okay thing to do. All right, I'm going to pass this video since we just watched that. Okay, so the next piece I want to share with you are some different available resources that I've got kind of highlighted that you can use to support behavior management in your settings. So some of the things that I want to share with you, one of them is our 4-H Accessible for All. That's our volunteer resource site that we have related to disabilities here in Minnesota. That's something that I've shared with you each time. Some of the things specifically that might be most useful for you as you think about supporting challenging behavior is using some things like those visual schedules we talked about. There's a couple different models available there that you can use. And just a reminder, when you're using those visual schedules, make sure you're making those schedules at whatever ability level your young people are at. So That might mean sometimes like you need to have real pictures of the activities that you're going to be doing. Sometimes just writing it's okay. Stick pictures. I mean, it really depends on what your group is okay with. Other things that can help to support behavior is to just have some of those accommodation supplies that we talked about last time available. Because if you know that you're seeing behavior happening when you're asking people to do a certain task, let's say, for example, cutting, if that's challenging for people, and you're seeing behavior because they're frustrated, if we can provide some of those loop scissors or mounted scissors in addition to the other scissors that we might already have available, it automatically can take out some of that frustration because you're providing some accommodation materials that allow something to be more doable for a young person. So again, just have those available at your programs. Make sure that you just have them out when you have all of your other supplies, because it's a great way, again, to reduce frustration. And we know that many of the behaviors that we see come because someone is frustrated, right? They come because maybe they don't have the skills to like physically do the things that you're asking them to do. Maybe they don't have the cognitive skills to be able to do something independently on their own that you're asking them to do. So have those accommodation supplies, use those strategies we've talked about for accommodations earlier, whenever you can, just to, again, support those frustration feelings, because that's where a lot of our challenging behaviors can come out of. Other resources available, Pacer Center here in Minnesota, that's kind of our group that really works with parents to help them kind of navigate this world of disability work. And they have a great handout that has examples of positive behavior intervention strategies, which has most of the things that I shared with you today. There's also another great tool that I can't talk enough about, is using regulation videos or activities throughout your activities that you're doing. And for those of you who aren't maybe as familiar with that, a regulation video or activity is really about helping to either one, like get energy out of your group, right? So getting them some opportunities to move, to get some energy out so they can focus on the things you want to do. It also can be things that help someone calm themselves or relax themselves, especially if they just came from a really exciting activity, either like outside of your group or something you just did really exciting within your group. And then there's Go Noodle, which I'll show you on the next slide of kind of what that is. But all of these that you see linked here, or I'll just, the first two links are on YouTube, so you can go there. And like I said, if you go to those, or you just like Google brain breaks, you'll see all kinds of them. There's a lot of things. Like I said, there's different ones that might have, a lot of the brain breaks are really about physical activity. So it might have a situation where it's like, you're going to have like a little scenario where you're going to go through and they're going to ask questions like a this or that, right? And you pick the this or the that, whichever one you agree with. And then there's going to be like a physical activity that you do with that. So it gets people to move, get some energy out, but just tons and tons of different ones of those. Brain breaks also, like an example that we often might use is like some of our camp songs. That's a brain break, right? And a lot of those are ones that you'll find when you search as well. Because again, it's an opportunity for someone to get out some of their wiggles, to move around a little bit, get out some of their energy, so they're hopefully ready to focus on what we do. So tons of examples of those, and there's pretty much every topic you can think about for a brain break that you can find on YouTube. So if there's if you've got a theme that you're doing for camp, like if you put that theme in and put brain break, you're probably going to find one, would be my guess, because there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of different brain breaks available. Breathing exercises, again, there's lots of different breathing exercises or strategies. If you go on to YouTube and search that, you'll find lots of fun ones. Again, there's like ones that can go with pretty much any type of topic you're thinking about. There's lots of like really, really fun and cool things. So again, check those out. Go Noodle has kind of a mix of all of those type of things. Go Noodle is a specific company that a lot of special education departments within our school districts use. And you can access many of them for free online. So just, check those out too. And I'll show you what their website looks like on the next slide as well. And these are, again, a great way to help regulate the group as you're doing things. When I did programs when I was working locally, like when I would do a day camp, I would always do like, maybe we're gonna do a learning activity, Then we're gonna do a brain break, right? Some type of movement activity, or a breathing activity. Then we'll come back and do like a learning, like sit down activity. Then we're gonna do it like a game or that, brain break, breathing activity, just to kind of like change up what you're doing. Because we know that probably beyond 20, 30 minutes, it's hard for a young person to sit and focus on one thing, especially if we're trying to expect them to learn something at the same time. So if we can really regulate what we're doing and control that of like sitting and learning, getting up and moving, right? Sitting and learning, getting up and moving. And by automatically using that type of structure, you're going to see less behavioral challenges, because people aren't going to be as distracted, as frustrated, unengaged with what you're doing, because you're allowing a lot of different things happening. And the other resource I would always tell you to lean into is, parents, school staff that might know that young person that you might have a connection with, or just anybody else who knows that young person, a volunteer, other youth, whoever that might be. They're going to be able to be those best experts, especially those parents, on that young person, and be able to give you ideas about, here's some things that we do at school, or here's some things that we do at home that are really successful when we're seeing behavior. And even also like helping you to identify what type of behavior you might see and what you might expect to see around that. Because if you know ahead of time what type of behavior you're going to see, it allows you a little bit of time to intentionally think about how you are going to respond when that happens. And again, if you know how the family is responding or how the school is responding and it's successful, if you can replicate that, it's going to make your job way, way easier as well. Because if they already know something that works, why try to come up with another option, right? Like use that same strategy that already works. Let's see. A comment in the chat, Go Noodle's a great resource. Yeah, they are a great resource. And I'll show you what their website looks like. If we had a bunch of time, I would explore some of these because they're really, really, really cool. But like I said, you can go to this Go Noodle website. You can create a free account if you want to like save videos if you want, or you can just like go and use them. And they have, like I said, every topic, right? Just like you can find on YouTube, like every topic of videos. When I pulled this, I think this was like Thursday, maybe, they had National Preschool Teacher Appreciation Day. So they've got, you can just see kind of a few samples of the videos. They've got Peppy Puppies. You can see there, it's like get up on your feet and do the Peppy Puppy dance, right? So it's a little dance that kind of gets you up and moving. Then Meow Moo Moo, so sing, dance, and practice patterns with this super funky Blazer Fresh song. And then they had Go Noodle Junior, so that has some additional activities available too. So lots of just really cool things, and pretty much everything that you can think of, there's a topic for. And their videos are all really fun, really funny. Like kids like them. As an adult, you'll like them. And they're things that you could find some of the favorites that you have or your group has, and maybe that's something that you use as part of your routine and you always do some of those same ones. Or it might be that you do totally different ones every time too. And you can see like on the top bar, you can like search by topics. You can see where it says topics there. You can put in, like I said, whatever your topic is. So if you're doing a weather day camp, you could put in weather and you'll get all kinds of different activities related to weather that you could do for some songs or breathing activities or whatever it might be. They have channels, so that's like they have different I would almost say characters right within their stuff, so you can click on and like find videos that have some of those similar characters. They have things about activities and routines, so you can kind of figure out like how do we use some of these songs to teach some activities and routines. Again, they also have some about trying to teach some skills and knowledge. They have games, like lots of really cool things. So if you haven't checked this site out, I would strongly encourage you to do it. I think like when I think about day camps or residential camps, some people love camp songs, right? And again, those are a great example of what a potential brain break can look like. If you love those and you want to lead those, cool, great, do that. But there's many of us who maybe that's not our strong point, right? Or maybe we don't have experience with doing that as much. And this provides a lot of different ways for you to do that. And you'll find that some of the, at least here in Minnesota, some of like the camp songs that we use, there's also Go Noodle videos of like the same ones, right? So they're kind of fun movement things that you can use, like put this up on a screen, put this on, an iPad, whatever it might be, for people to follow along and do. But like I said, if we were in person, maybe I'd make you do one of these because they're really fun and exciting. So if you haven't checked this out or utilized some like movement breaks, brain breaks, breathing activities in your programming, I would strongly encourage you to do so because it's a great way to automatically help reduce some of the challenging behavior that you're seeing, because you're allowing people to get out the pent up energy they might have, but you're also teaching them some different strategies to help them calm themselves, to help them be able to focus and learn to like self-regulate some of their emotions and behaviors that they have. So anybody have any that is familiar maybe with Go Noodle, any favorites that you would share that you think people should really check out or think about utilizing? I can tell you, like personally at home, my kids used to love Kitty High Five. Like it's a really funny one where they have like a cat who gives a high five and they're just doing all of these really like weird, goofy things. And I feel like we used to watch it like a million times at home. My kids loved that one. There's also like a breathing one. I can't remember the exact title of it, but it's like a freeze one and you melt and stuff. So that one's another like just really fun one to do to teach kids how to kind of like tense up their body and release some of that energy that they might have pent up with stress that can go with just everyday stuff. So yeah, let's see. What do we have in here? I've got a few that are coming. Oh, Moose Tube, yes, that is a ton of camp songs. Yes, a ton of camp songs on. If you go, like I said, on that channels and go to the Moose Tube, it's someone who wears like a moose costume. If you aren't familiar with that, and lots of camp songs, super fun, and they usually have a bunch of like older, I would say like high schoolish age kids that are singing them with them. So students really enjoyed that one. Yeah, that's definitely a fun one. Many kids yoga videos. Yeah, tons of kids yoga, kind of some of those relaxation things on there. So some really cool things. Story time online is also a good resource, absolutely, for some calm down things. Doing also found a lot of success with doing an activity on Go Noodle and then following with the breathing one. Yes, for sure. Again, about like, being able to, kind of help them get some of that energy out and then relax, right? Because a lot of those like activities on there are pretty high energy, right? Like, so it's a great way to get out some of that energy, but then to calm down and relax when you're doing that. And then another question about would it be okay to use this with our ambassadors? Absolutely, right? We've adapted this and done a similar training for our camp counselors here in Minnesota for some of our camps. Because again, like some of those people are frontline people who are going to be working with young people at a project workshop, at a day camp, at a residential camp, whatever it might be like. And if we can help prepare them to automatically, hopefully put some strategies in place that are going to reduce behavior, great, right? So yes, definitely use any and all pieces of the stuff that you're seeing to work with your ambassadors or camp counselors or whoever you think is a good fit. So, all right, then last question is time is really for us to ask questions. We have a little less than 10 minutes. So I want to allow a little bit of time for you to be able to do that. Or again, if you have another resource that you've used that you think others would really find beneficial or fun, make sure that you share that with us too, because it's great to be able to learn from each other a little bit more about things that we've found that have made our work easier or that maybe have made challenging behaviors a little bit easier to handle. And while you're doing that, I'm going to put this up here as well on the screen. If you've been to one of the other sessions, I always have this slide at the end with a question for you to reflect on. So I would love to hear a little bit either unmuted or in the chat box about if there's any strategy that I shared today that you think might be especially helpful in your work with 4-H. And then if you also can complete for me the evaluation form, that's a great way for me to get some feedback on how things were today, what you want to learn more about, all of that. And then we'll have our last session, which is crazy to think, in just 2-3 weeks, I suppose, here now. And in that session, we will talk specifically about behavior really being a form of communication. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. And then we'll have some time for you to be able to work through some different scenarios, and we'll do that in small groups for you to think about for young people with a disability, what is that behavior communicating and how can we help support that? What type of strategies specifically can we put in place to be able to help a young person be more successful in our program? All right, like I said, I'll stick on for however long people want to stay on and ask questions. Otherwise, again, thanks for joining today. Hopefully it was valuable for you, and we will see you in a few weeks again. So enjoy your day and week.
You're amazing, Darcy. Thank you so much. I have
welcome.
all of the emails coming your way for the attendees on the call today, so we can send out that email.
Wonderful.